What did he say?
He said hello, hyperspace.
Nice and quiet like.
Jedi Master Luminara and Julie. He's been imprisoned somewhere in the Stygian system.
We can't pass this up.
Good luck.
Come on, kid, do something. Use the Force. Ezra, your formal Jedi training starts tomorrow. I am the Inquisitor.
We're busted.
Chopper, get us out of here.
Oh, look, Chopper made friends.
Hera, you're good to go.
The odds of our mission becoming a complete debacle are... Don't you shush me.
This is the Padawan I encountered on Stygian Prime.
Have no fear. Help is on the way. Advance and fire! There's a lot more at stake than you realize.
What's the worst that could happen?
We both wind up dead. Well, kid, you pulled it off.
Was there ever any doubt?
Yes.
Hi, everybody, and welcome once again to GeekFest Rants. My name is Carlos Perona, and joining me, I have James. Say hi, James.
Hello.
Well, I know it's been probably 10 minutes since we have not talked about Star Wars, so guess what? We're going to talk about Star Wars again. We are going to go a little deeper this time to kind of touch upon, we're not going to go too nuts because the season basically has just started. We're about halfway there. We're talking about Star Wars Rebels. We've been kind of teasing this for a while. They've been giving us little bits and pieces, and even in book form, they have given us it's called let me see the name of it here, the visual guide. And I remember I was all excited because, oh my God, they put out the visual guide even before the show premiered, and they're showing you all these characters, and I'm getting all excited and happy about it. And it's like, oh, they have this ship. Oh, they have that ship. Look, this guy looks like a McQuarrie concept, this, McQuarrie that. And we hadn't even seen the show then. And at the time, I remember you were a little...
I was very strongly
mixed
feeling...
emotions.
Yeah, I felt like it was not going to be for me, and it was not going to be Star Wars the way I know it.
Right. I mean, we had off the bat, this is the closest thing, obviously, to Clone Wars that is out there, that has been out there, obviously. It's another cartoon. It's another, I don't know if you can call it CGI, but it is a kind of a computer-generated kind of cartoon art rather than the traditional animation, the hand-drawn. This is more like Clone Wars. And even the style of the characters, while not exactly Clone Warsy, they didn't have too many angular features. These are a little more curvy features, a little softer features. If it's the type of thing that turns people off, to Clone Wars, obviously people are going to say, wait a minute, another one of these type of weird looking puppet head, characters. But no, I mean, from the start, I think they tweaked it a little, and I think in a positive manner. Now, granted, in all the interviews I've been hearing is that because it's the same team of animators as before, even though Disney is involved, they are using a heck of a lot of ex-Clone War artists. They benefit from the fact that anything they did wrong or everything they experimented with Clone Wars, they little by little, season by season, after 6 seasons, after all, they were able to perfect so many things that by now what you're seeing, to me at least, it looks so much better than, Clone War Episode 1. What do you think?
Well, my biggest problem is that the angular stuff, that did seems to strike me weird at first, at the very first viewing of the Clone Wars movie. But you did get used to it, or they got better at it. But as far as Rebels goes, I am pleasantly surprised. I did not like what I thought I perceived as what it was going to be. And the only thing now that I think I don't like is the very Disneyfication of the main actor, and that's, I guess, Ezra, right?
Yeah. The biggest complaint most people said initially was that he looks like Aladdin.
Yeah, and that's exactly what I said to you. And it's like, well, okay, I understand Disney, they have a style, but that kid, it just doesn't. He is the only one to me right now that doesn't fit. And he's still, as much as I've watched it, when I see him, I'm like, oh, look, there's Aladdin. And I know I'm being silly. I'm just saying that in my head because the story is strong and he does, his character is a good character. But that's the only thing. Give the kid a haircut. I don't know what they could do. I'm just being silly.
Now, but do you think that it's just a coincidence that that's what he looks like? Or do you think some Disney exec said, you know what, if we make him look like Aladdin, then people might subconsciously start buying Aladdin toys? Do you think that's
Aladdin's
a conspiracy?
I don't know. Is Aladdin even that big of a deal anymore? It's almost a 20-year.
I don't even think people remember what Aladdin is.
And, Jafar is already dead. I don't even know if we care.
I honestly, like I said, I don't know if anybody remembers it.
Well, anyway, I just say Aladdin. I never actually even saw Aladdin, but I know what he looked like, and that's kind of what Ezra looked like. And the one tiny other little thing I don't like, before we get into all the things we do like, is I don't care for the voice of Zeb.
Yes.
He's got this, he sounds like, Alfred the Butler, or,
he's got like an Australian accent mixed with something else.
It just bugs me because he's a monstery type of guy, and I'm not thinking he has to sound monstery, but it's just not right. When I hear him opening his mouth, it's like, oh, would you like some Grey Poupon? I didn't even put another shrimp on the barbie.
It's too earthy. You're saying it's too
put another shrimp on the barbie, whatever it is. I'm not trying to do it with the right accent. I'm just trying to be silly, but it bugs me very slightly that he is this posh monster as opposed to I don't need the racial stereotype monster that we've gotten in the more modern Star Warses, but this guy sounds a little too polite. But I don't really know his people, so maybe he was raised right.
Well, first of all, while we're talking about this character, this is the character that is very obviously and admittedly so inspired by the McQuarrie Chewbacca concept.
Yeah. And that's why I kind of...
Big bug eyes, big, strong-looking, somewhat reptilian-ish, maybe.
I kind of give him a pass because his, it's all new to me. We're only in season 1, and by the end, these will be beloved characters, perhaps, too, after 6 seasons like Clone Wars. I wasn't so sure about Ahsoka at first, either, let me tell you. But
speaking of where we are at with the season, let's kind of let them know where we're at in timing-wise. We're about halfway through the first season. The first season, I believe, is going to have a total of about 13 episodes. Now, there is a bunch of episodes or scenes or whatever we want to call them, segments, if you will, that comprise part of this first season, but it's not considered to be a single episode or episode 1, episode 2, episode 3. Let's differentiate between there's episode numbers and production numbers.
Well, do you really think that that's that big of a deal? Those were just like promos, even though they're counting as
right, but it's not a big deal in terms
of one episode. There,
it's not. But I think if you're a fan of the show, I would not want to miss that. I would want that. If this thing ever came out on DVD, I would be disappointed if it's not there.
I'm sure they're going to be there. I'm sure they're out there right now. You can get them. You can get them on the Disney XD site.
Yeah, what we're talking about is before the series premiered, they put out a series of shorts. They're about 5-7 minutes apiece, and it's little stories that introduce you to some of these characters and some action scenes to kind of tease you of what things are going to be like. They're not repeating things. They're not repeating little chunks of future episodes. These are tiny little stories that are for you to digest and then move on to the next. There's a total of 4 of them, and together the 4 episodes are what we would consider to be episode 101. So in theory, if you take those 4 little episodes, it's 101A, 101B, 101C, and 101D. After that, you have then the pilot or the premiere movie, if you will, which in reality, that movie comprises of 2 standard episodes, 102 and 103. But they are not calling this the first episode. They're calling it kind of like the pilot movie, the same way as Clone Wars had. Remember when they released the movie in the theater? That was considered to be the movie. This is considered to be the movie for this show. This show starts with episode 1, which is really production number 104. So you kind of move in a couple of steps by the time you get to show number 1. And like I said, we're about halfway into the first season now. And, I think in a way, just like any show, you name it, the first episodes, it's more about getting to know the characters, and they're introducing you as many of these main characters as possible.
You're trying to get the world. You're trying to feel what the world is like.
Right, and they give you the single episodes of, well, let's talk about this guy's history, and let's talk about that guy's history, and what's his deal.
All right, well, that's what I want to talk about. Let's talk about how do we think this fits in Star Wars. Is this Star Wars?
You start. You can start.
After many, many, many times saying I did not believe this would be good, I now decree this is Star Wars. This is a very good representation of animated Star Wars worlds.
Well, tell us where we are time-wise in Star Wars. Where is this?
I guess we're 5 years before meeting Luke Skywalker, let's say, before A New Hope. It's been about 14 or 15 years after the Emperor has taken over.
Right, the fall of the Republic.
I'm impressed that they mentioned that even in there, that, and the prequels, even though they're not kind of in fashion right now, that they weren't completely annihilated from this world and, verboten. And they do mention in an episode that it's Empire Day and the Emperor launched the Empire as a result of blah, 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 and so on and so forth. And I was glad to see that. As far as other Star Wars elements, they really are trying. And Filoni, upon introducing this, said there would be a lot of things that we'd be familiar with and a lot of things we've kind of seen before or touched upon before. And I know what you love and older toy fans like me love is that they've worked in the Imperial troop transport, which was a toy, and it was like maybe one of the earliest EU things.
Yeah,
but
exactly.
It's really cool to see it being used in an important manner, in an important way, that it's like, hey, now my toy, it took 38 years, but now my toy is cool, It's not just something they were trying to get money out of me.
I agree. I completely agree with you with, without getting specific, and we are going to get specific about certain things. With me, the big hits for this show so far is, and again, we're very early, so the show to me hasn't developed that much yet, but off the bat, I love the music. I love the fact that they incorporate so much John Williams music into it. The themes are more prevalent than they were on Clone Wars.
I can see them tippy-toeing, trying to, the way the themes are, and the image on the screen are trying to get you to feel the same way. If a massive capital ship is coming across the screen, they use similar cues, like when the Star Destroyers in Empire and New Hope. When there's a gentle kind of, like a Force-esque kind of feel. They're using that.
The Yoda's theme comes in the background a little bit.
Some of that kind of gentle stuff. When the Imperials are on, they're not quite using the Imperial March, but you get a taste of something like that.
Now, not only that, but like you mentioned, audio-wise, you get these cues with music. But I also love the fact that they seem to be using so much more original trilogy sound effects that I'm familiar with, that I recognize, like the sound of a TIE fighter. I recognize a speeder, a biker speeder type of sound. I love those sounds.
That's why I say it's Star Wars, because they could have really screwed it up. And the Clone Wars and the clones were not quite Stormtroopers. They were clones. And when you hear them, and they had a certain style, their voices, their mannerisms, the movements, Stormtroopers acted in a certain way. I know this is minutia for people who aren't as big fans as we are, but Stormtroopers acted in a certain way. They almost had this kind of like childlike innocence about them when they're looking at things, and the tilting of their heads and the way they moved, even though they were troops and soldiers. You know what I mean? When they're looking at stuff, the way the helmet would move, the actor had to, and I can almost imagine, the actor had to be a little bit more underneath the costume, a little bit more animated.
Well, they're so limited. They don't have much to react.
So to get some type, you can't see their eyes, you can't see their facial expression. So to get like a tilted head, and it reminds me of like when a dog hears some noise, it's like he'll look sideways and just tilt like, oh, what? That's how Stormtrooper helmets tended to act. And again, it's very, very minutia. But if you watch the original trilogy and then you watch this, they made the Stormtroopers, their movements, the way they tilt their heads and the way they address each other and regard each other. And, like it's not just like they're turning like all stiff.
Yeah.
There's a fluidness in a Stormtrooper. and they picked it up right. And that's something I noticed.
They did. And the thing that I would say is the third major thing for me that makes me like the show so much is the fact that, and they said this, again, this is on purpose. They did this on purpose. It's not by accident. They are relying so much on McQuarrie concept art and inspiration for technology and things.
Do you think it's too much? Or no?
I love it. The more the better, because you got to be a complete Star Wars nut to really notice these things. Off the bat, the planet Lothal, the pictures we've seen of it, the prairie lands with those mounds, that's old McQuarrie stuff that is lost in art books. Really, you only can go to an art book, an old making of art book. And you've studied all these books more than anybody I know, and so you would know. And I love it. I love it when this stuff pops up. You mentioned earlier the Imperial True Transport, even though it's not exactly a McQuarrie concept, but the fact that they're giving you stuff from your childhood that, again, you got to be a little more than your average fan to.
And now it's moving.
Recognize. Yeah, and it's moving. It's doing all kinds of things.
It's not just a picture that you saw like 30 years, 40 years ago.
Right. And not only are they using it once, they're using it like every 2 or 3 episodes. This thing shows up, and I love it. I love the fact that they keep using it.
And that's why Chopper, the animated astromech droid, is not too much. Chopper is playing the part of Orko and Batmite and all those other, the Wonder Twin guy, was their little monkey,
The little monkey, little blue, Gleek.
Gleek. He's playing that foil. Like I remember in the Brady Kids cartoon, they had like 2 panda bears and a bird, and like all these shows that have something else. They have one animal or one character.
Well, he's Jar Jar Binks. He's the Jar Jar without being.
I wouldn't even go
ridiculous.
that far. He's the foil. He's the guy you can cut to, and he's basically saying like "F you" in his droid voice, with like when somebody screws up or something.
And some people can understand that, and most of us can't.
Yeah, but I don't hate him. And I don't think he's a bad character because he is using his parts the way McQuarrie created R2 to use his parts.
Well, not only that,
or even R5, the way R5D4 and those style,
I mean,
they were supposed to. We just didn't see them because he basically blew up after he was introduced. Not
only that, you go into the sketchbooks, the McQuarrie sketchbooks, and that sort of thing, and you do see that the R2 before the final version of R2, he did have a more short, stout, smaller head, lots of mechanical arms, a lot of rolling around with a big rolling wheel underneath. They grabbed all that. They're recycling all that.
Even in the prequels, they didn't use astromech droids as much as we thought they could. Or if you think back of it, basically other than R2 and in the Clone Wars other than R2, there's one episode where you see the astromech droids really working together and using their parts.
Yeah.
But in the movies, other than in the very beginning when R2's introduced and you see the other ones on top of the Queen's ship, they kind of forgot all that stuff, all the little other things other than, the basics. R2 had his rockets, which is a concept type thing. They worked it back in. But this Chopper, he's the goofy little sidekick foil, but he doesn't suck, if you will.
Even the main hero ship, the Ghost, which we talked about in the past, we've done the Millennium Falcon specials that I absolutely loved. It's not exactly a McQuarrie-inspired creation, but the fact that, to me, it looks like they actually went to even, not necessarily McQuarrie, but they actually opened up some of the old books that we bought and we've seen and said, you know what, let's take a chunk of that and let's take a piece of this and there we go. Here's our new ship.
And that's evident in the other ships as well. The inspiration for the TIE Advance, we'll call it, because that's what Vader's ship was, the TIE Advance or the TIE X1 or whatever you would want to call it compared to the regular TIE fighter. You can see them, again, tippy-toeing into, it's coming from the Darth Maul, what was his
his infiltrator, his Sith infiltrator.
It's coming from that, the way the wings act, and it's going towards the Vader X1.
Exactly.
And that's a nice, because that's basically, these are things, like if you know anything about car design or, like machinery design, it doesn't just pop up the year it comes out. They work on that. So right now, this was 5 years before the TIE Advanced, which is Vader's ship, shows up on screen. It's got to be in the works in the foreseeable future, which is another thing we've talked about, and we'll mention it. Where's the Death Star at this point?
Well, we talked about that. We're trying to figure that out. And I wouldn't be surprised if at a certain point they will address that and they'll tippy-toe into it. They'll just touch upon it. But going back to what you just mentioned about ship design and this and that, the AT-DP Walker, which is obviously the pre-Chicken Walker, the
it
pre-AT-ST.
It actually looks more like the original Chicken Walker that we were introduced to in the artwork. And actually in Empire, the very first look of the original Chicken Walker wasn't as square. it had a little bit more, it seemed
Right.
like a rounder front, which is what these guys have.
Again, it's out of the Joe Johnston sketchbooks. It's out of it comes straight out of that. With the prequels, the only time I remember them tippy-toeing into Chicken Walker territory, they had a vehicle that the trooper could ride and
It
just
was
sit
lower.
on top of it.
It was lower, and it was
It
like
was much
not so-
shorter. You're
yeah.
absolutely right. The other thing I want to mention a little bit more about is, again, we've done a couple of episodes on the history of Stormtroopers, the evolution of a Stormtrooper and a Clone Trooper. One of the things that they cleared up, as far as I'm concerned, is the fact that they confirmed in one of these interviews, these little behind the scenes with, I think Pablo Hidalgo might have been the guy talking about it, that as far as they're concerned, it's 5 years before New Hope, and there are no more clones. Your Stormtroopers are now completely either recruits or drafts or professional, soldiers, but the cloning system is over with. So, no more arguing about that.
Who shuts that down? The Emperor would have shut it down, I guess, right?
Yeah.
But why wouldn't the Emperor, just real quick, really just 2 seconds, why wouldn't the Emperor want to keep clones rather than unpredictable enlistees or conscripted troopers?
I think the clones were too expensive.
Okay.
And they last
really?
they're
It's too expensive
short.
for the Empire? Why doesn't the Empire just take over the planet?
Well, I think they just needed them to win the war, and then you get rid of them, and now you have a source of employment for your masses.
Yeah.
You don't want people angry at you that you're farming out your army to
And you don't want your able-bodied men to be picking up arms against you. You want to have them be conscripted or drafted to be your guys.
Right. Unfortunately, it results in them not having as good as an army as they used to have, because we know that the Stormtroopers I'm pretty sure they're not as good as the clones were. The clones seem to be much better unit, and they used to work much better with each other. But that's off the bat.
We've never really seen, maybe this will, well, no, it really can't change. Maybe it'll change in this show. We've never really seen Stormtroopers fighting like we did in the Clone War era and in the Clone Wars episodes. And maybe we'll see something similar to that in the future movies, episode 7 and beyond. But think about the Stormtroopers were basically just guarding their posts on the Death Star and running around chasing, the infiltrators.
Right.
Maybe the closest we saw of a proper regimented set of troops is on Hoth, but we really didn't see the foot soldiers as much. They were there and we noticed them, but they weren't really, you didn't see their lineups and stuff like that in there.
No, I don't know if we ever talked about it on the air, but I know we talked about it privately, that in Empire, there was supposed to be in the early drafts, the invasion of Hoth was supposed to be AT-ATs. AT-ATs would kind of clear the way, like a tank clears the way. Yeah. And behind the AT-ATs, you would have these transport vehicles
just to
that would
overwhelm
unload
them with people, with soldiers.
Kind of like those ships in World War II that would just open up the back and everybody would come out.
Yep.
It would have vehicles like that that would unload all the snowtroopers. And
they
the
just didn't need it. It took too long and it visually wasn't
they would
as
have to
pleasing
huff and puff. They would have to kind of run from one location to the other to actually get into the base. But again, in the drafts, they eliminated. There would have been too much special effects. With live action people running with big ships, little ships. Yeah. They said, screw it. Everybody just pretend, I guess, that everybody's hiding inside the AT-ATs.
And the Stormtroopers that we eventually see on Endor, they're kind of just, they're there and they're not really expecting to be overwhelmed by Ewoks.
Yeah,
and they're not expecting to be attacked by a rebel force.
It's kind of like the national, it's like your National Reserve. They're there on weekends and they don't expect too much work.
This is an outpost that they don't expect much action. Even though the Death Star is there, they're not. Yeah. They're kind of caught off guard by the Ewoks, and in hindsight, it's like, well, you've got the Death Star there. You couldn't send down thousands of, another battalion, another division of.
You figure they would be completely packed.
Where they're just sitting up there on the Death Star waiting to get blown up, or hoping that the rebels don't blow them up. There must be more troops someplace,
right?
And they're clearly not on Endor.
But again, getting back to this show,
Rebels
is where we see the first transition, or at least it's the first. We're not seeing the link. We don't see the handing over because obviously another 10 or 15 years passed before Sith and this the show. But this is the first time we see a real Stormtrooper in action, which is something that I remember at first I was having a little bit of a problem because. Remember, we're coming off of a show where the troopers, the Stormtroopers, the Clone Troopers are good guys, and we like them. And we like the way that they fight as a team because they're your good guys. Now, all of a sudden, the show changed, and we are supposed to not feel bad for these guys who are dying left. They're being shot left and right like they're cannon fodder. And it's a little weird to kind of get back into that mode, that original trilogy mode of, oh, that's right, they're bad guys. It's okay for them to die.
Well, the other thing is, then you have the element of, like, I noticed in Empire Day, he says, oh, my dad's a real patriot, and he gets all excited on Empire Day, blah, blah, blah. Like, there's an element of people who are pro-Empire. They're, like, excited that the Empire, protects them. And, I guess they wave the flag of the Empire, or they,
But that's nothing new.
cheer
That's
the
nothing
troops.
new to this type of a show, because if you remember in Clone Wars, they purposely had shows where people were like, Republic or Separatist, I don't care. They're bad guys on both sides, and people are doing horrendous things on either side sometimes. And it's not clear cut all the time that they have to convince the sides to be on their side.
You can see there's an element of Imperials that are just ball busters to the people.
Oh, yeah.
And you can see an element very slightly emerging of people who are fond, they are patriots, they are supportive of the Empire, or they're non-committal, but they just aren't involved with rebellion at this point.
Well, let's talk about the main heavies, the baddies of the show, which we have two main ones that we've already been introduced to. What do you think of those two baddies?
Well, they're almost, at this moment, the weakest link of the show, because the Inquisitor's not that bad, and I don't really feel like he's... Like, I don't know. He feels like a comic book or cartoon bad guy at the moment. I don't know why I feel that way, but he's not, he's not the Emperor. He's not Vader. And I just don't feel like I've seen enough of him yet. He's kind of like just glared at us and said he has this plan and this is going to happen. So nothing really has overwhelmed me. The other guy, Callus...
He's more of like a Tarkin type.
That's giving him too much credit. He comes across like a TV Nazi or something like that. It's like, yes, I'm mean, but it's like, what's with those pork chop sideburns? And I know they're trying to be Star Wars-esque, like that was the era, and the long hair and the sideburns.
Hey man, it's the 70s, don't you know?
Well, it just looks goofy. And then he wears that special hat instead of wear like his special helmet, which we've never seen a guy wear that kind of helmet before. So I would have liked it to be more, what we've seen already, or a version of the helmet. I guess that's what it is. It's a tighter version of the helmet that the naval officers wear.
Right, and it kind of wraps around a little more. I guess for the movies they open them up.
Yeah, he's not terrible though. I'm okay with him. I'm not scared when I see him. It doesn't.
What's cool is also that by the introduction of the Empire, or the more modern Empire that we're more familiar with, we also get a more clear view of Star Destroyers.
Yeah,
which is something that it's like they look pretty dead on. Like I don't think they modify them any more than they already have.
And we're seeing their hangars a little bit, and we're seeing how they hold the ships and how the ships
how the X-wings are attached.
Dispersed.
And I also like the fact that they use these also like almost like carrier ships that are just carrying TIE fighters underneath, like they're hanging by them, which is kind of cool too. And I think we also saw an episode where they're carrying the chicken walkers also.
Yes, yeah, and almost like a drop ship.
Right. Now, another call outs to McQuarrie, I think, is the helmet that Ezra stole or has hiding there.
Yeah,
it's the old McQuarrie Empire snow concept helmet.
Is it the snow guy? Yeah, is that what it is?
Yeah, it's like the snow one, yeah.
Yeah, and there's a couple the guys who are piloting have we seen AT-AT yet? I'm curious. Did we see an AT-AT yet?
No.
So it's just the walker,
not
just
yet.
the scout-looking ones. Okay.
Yeah, and that's where he stole them from. It's from those guys.
Yeah. And those guys have, that's the cool helmet. You're right. That's the one I like. But I have seen other Imperials, and they are looking good. Yeah. And I like the girl who dressed like the Mandalorian. I think she's one of my favorites, even though I'm not quite sure. If I had to pick somebody who was going to die, she's the one at this point. You know what I'm saying? Like if somebody...
She's the red shirt?
No, not quite the red shirt, but if somebody in the cast that we were like a Tasha Yar, everywhere a team, but if somebody were going to die and it was going to be a very special, sad episode and there'd be dark, sad music, slow music, it's going to be her.
You said Misa going to die?
Because she's already had an episode where she questions like, oh, nobody trusts me with the secrets and I'm not like, it's almost, they can't get rid of Ezra. They can't get rid of Callus. They can't get rid of the girl who's piloting the ship or the creature. So I say, if we were going to lose anybody in the, terrible, sad episode, it's her.
Well, that's one of the things about the show is that, it's really difficult to know the inspiration, or not so much the inspiration, but the reasoning behind why certain things are the way they are. Off the bat, I always keep thinking that because this is not directly being structured by Lucas directly like Clone Wars was, because it's Disney, that this show has a more free reign, if you will, of being able to tap into certain things that Lucas might have normally been saying, no, guys, you can't touch this. This is my
Didn't it always seem like George was always holding stuff back for some future day, but then swearing to us that there was never going to be anything else? It was It wasn't going to happen. So what was he? I'd like to interview him and hear him.
And sometimes he would even contradict himself, because after telling Filoni, for example, don't do this, 2 years later, he would do this. So now it looks like, because you don't have Lucas saying that anymore, I think the people in charge, I imagine it must be the Disney people in charge, they're giving them more free reign. I mean, off the bat, we already had an episode that premiered on ABC, which they gave us Darth Vader for a few minutes.
Well, I'd like to talk about that. Yeah, I'd like to talk about that, because Darth Vader was one of the untouchables for many, many years on the Clone Wars. And towards the end of the Clone Wars, they tippy-toed into that with Anakin's future fate when they had that esoteric episode that you had the sound of Vader. I don't know if we actually saw imagery of Vader.
Didn't you see him like in the smoke or something?
And and then eventually with the Yoda episode, I think we got a little, I think we danced a little closer to that. And that was the end. And I don't even know if George was still involved, if that was a Filoni. I'd love to talk to Filoni and know, like, I need like maybe 10 minutes with him with these 10 key questions to just see.
No, I'm pretty sure if it was Clone Wars, Lucas was still putting his finger on it.
Well, let's talk very quickly about that. Who is an untouchable and who is not an untouchable? Because, okay, we've already got Darth Vader. We've already got Obi-Wan very slightly. We already kind of got prequel era Jedi in the form of it was just bait. It was a dead Jedi, but it was just bait. And what we saw imagery. We kind of saw the Emperor in the
of course we did.
In the Hollow. We saw the Emperor in the HoloNet. But here's something else that I see, and I haven't heard this, but I'm looking online for the cast, and they show the main cast, the Imperial cast, and then others. And let me just, before I say, we've already got Bail Organa, C-3PO, and R2, which is obvious because they would be heavy players in that pre-A New Hope era. But I see Billy Dee Williams as Lando Calrissian as another character. Now, I assume we haven't seen him yet. That's an episode that hasn't appeared yet. How are we going to see Lando Calrissian? Lando is older than Han by about maybe 10 years or so, or ish, maybe it might be 5 years. So he could be around as well. I mean, Han Solo was 30, say low 30s in A New Hope. So right now he's in his middle 20s or late 20s.
Well, it could be, I'm not sure if it'll be Lando.
But Lando's about 30 right now.
Or pre-Bespin Lando.
Well, it's going to be pre-Bespin Lando, obviously. Well, I see what you're saying. Bespin Lando, yeah. Well,
right.
But Lando is apparently going to appear in Rebels.
Yes.
Did you know about that?
Oh, yes, I did.
Oh, well, how did I miss that?
They never made the official announcement, but I think I remember not too long ago, Billy Dee Williams let it slip that he was doing something for Star Wars, and everybody was assuming it was going to be either Rebels or Episode 7.
Yeah, he apparently isn't in Episode 7.
And at a certain point, they kind of let it out of the bag that, he's going to reprise Lando again in some shape or form.
Okay, good. Because a lot of people were upset that he apparently is not going to be participating in Episode 7. But again, we don't know any... The whole presentation of Episode 7 has not been... Like, we think we know a lot of what we're getting.
Yeah. No, I'm still convinced he will show up at a future movie. I can guarantee it. If the man's alive, he'll show up.
Yeah. This is a new era of Star Wars. And like the Marvel series, there may be post-credits or things like that other guys show up in or something.
Yeah, who knows? I think it's going to be more than a cameo for him.
Okay, good.
Again, remember, it's not Lucas. Lucas would probably say, no, never, 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 ever, ever. But no. They'll get him in. If he's alive and functional, they'll do it. I guarantee it.
I don't feel Clone Wars suffered by not touching upon anybody that we thought was an untouchable.
No, it would have been nice, but it doesn't kill the show. Not at all.
It's funny. The Lego Star Wars animated show
they go
touched
crazy.
upon young Han, where it's like, who knows if Han Solo is going to appear anywhere in Rebels. I mean, it doesn't make sense that he doesn't. It would be crazy that he's involved with these characters because everybody isn't intertwined as much as there's fate in the galaxy and all that blah blah blah. I don't think he needs to show up until New Hope.
The only other instance that I am aware of a character returning is going to be Yoda, believe it or not. From what I understand, they are going to be using Yoda's voice as him kind of communicating with Ezra, I believe, and Kanan. So you will not visually see Yoda, but you will hear him. And this is apparently, from what I understand, this was Dave Filoni's choice. He wanted to just use the voice rather than the image. You know, they don't want you to think that Yoda is traveling around, you know, the galaxy while he's hiding out at the same time. What's unusual and really good is the fact that they somehow managed to get Frank Oz to return to do the voice. You know, for all these years, all these different animated shows, they've had other people. Tom Kane specifically was doing a lot of the voice. But for this particular episode that's coming up, you know, I believe it might be one of the premiering episodes, you know, for the second half of the season. You are going to have a scene or a storyline having to do, you know, with Yoda kind of advising these two characters from this new series. Let me ask you something, because I know this is something you were concerned about when we first started talking about Rebels, you know, before it premiered. And it has to do, again, with the Disney aspect of being a show under the Disney banner and the fact that the Disney people are calling the shots. Do you still think that this is a show that could suffer or will suffer from the, you know, let's say, for example, Disney wanting to be very diverse in the type of characters they portray and being more interested in diversity than in story?
In diversity of, like, the actors, like...
Whether it's female characters.
Well, I think it's okay. They've gotten too strong.
A young person, a boy, a female character.
I feel there's two strong female characters on the show as main characters. The main boy is a boy because younger people, they're trying to lure them in, kind of like Ahsoka was. And Callus and Zeb are kind of like there for, you know, the tougher guys. I don't think we have that kind of issue because they've already shown us a number of creatures. There's been Rhodians. There's been other things, hammerhead types that...
and new creatures we've never seen before they introduce also. They're not just recycling the old stuff.
They kind of showed somebody being manipulated by a head thing. I don't know what it's called, but like Lobot used.
Yeah.
So they tied that in as something that exists. It wasn't proprietary to Lobot. It wasn't just him or his people. It's something that it's used, I guess, for a guy who's being, you know, controlled cybernetically. But I don't think Disney is going to screw it up now. I think they got good reviews. I think they got, you know, positive fan feedback. There were a couple of bad reviews about the style of how they used, you know, the story, but it wasn't really anything, you know, jarring.
Right. They have a good team, apparently, from what we've seen. I mean, obviously, the biggest name we are familiar with is Filoni, and Filoni is somebody that I was very afraid that they would only use at first and then discard. So I really hope they keep him because he's not the top guy anymore. He kind of has to share the mantle.
With the loss of their head writer or one of their executive producer writers.
Greg Weisman apparently has already left the show.
Yeah, looking at the style of shows that he's written some pretty strong material in terms of superhero stuff and some other stuff. You know, Batman, other Justice League type stuff. So, yeah, if they lose a Filoni type guy or some of these other guys. Look, I've been given the impression that this is introducing some things and styles that will be in episode 7, even though there's 3 movies in between this and episode 7 that are very powerful. I have a feeling that they're going to kind of like, you know, like the trial balloons, like if the White House says, oh, we might allow, you know, 10 million Romanian people to live in this country, they put that out like a week or 2 ahead of time in a side thing like an unnamed source or something like that. Well, I think this is what they're doing with Rebels. They're putting in a little bit of a trial balloon on certain characters or certain styles of things. So when we see them in episode 7, we go, oh, that's not Star Wars. That's an insult. No, it's like, okay, yeah, because I've seen it. I'm used to that guy, or I'm used to that.
But they already told us they're trying to unify everything more than ever before, you know, under the Disney banner. And they do want to kind of have this show somehow link to whatever movies exist out there.
Yeah.
So it doesn't feel so much like, oh, that's a whole other thing on the side that has nothing to do with this. They want to make it more tied in. And like you said, it might most likely be character related or species related or something like that.
Well, it did strike me as odd that, like I said, as we've talked about in many, the Emperor is very human-centric in his leadership, and that the Inquisitor might be more of a Vader guy. Yeah. But I think the Inquisitor being a Sith-style guy is kind of how it's kind of what
he's a Force user, but he's not a Sith. He's like Grievous. Grievous could do like a lot of interesting things, but he's not a full-blown Sith. He's just somebody who's able to tap into some of the skills of a Sith, but he doesn't have the magic, if you will.
And that's what I think some of episode 7 will involve. Other Force users, specifically Sith and non-Sith. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
They might be trained Jedi, but we're going to come across people. That's something we can end on. It's like, you know, they're not really Jedi.
No, they're not.
Ezra and Kanan are not really Jedi, but they have enough Jedi skills, kind of like Luke did when he, could just sense, like he didn't have any training, but
I think they implied that Kanan might have been a Padawan, but he was never graduated. Let's put it that way.
Well, Kanan was supposed to be involved with Deepa Bilaba, which we saw in Attack of the Clones, I think.
Yeah.
It's a she, I think, but maybe it's a he. I don't know. I lose track of who's who anymore of the Jedi. But I think that person died, and, he basically was out there on his own after the whole Order 66.
They all went into hiding. They got the message from Obi-Wan, and everybody's just...
Ezra represents somebody who probably would have been identified as the high midichlorian.
Yes.
Going with the old style, going with the prequel style.
But they never found them. They never knew about him.
Yeah, he would have been identified, brought into the temple, perhaps trained if it was strong. And now he's out on his own, just a wanderer. So Kanan is going to do the whole thing, and I guess we're supposed to hope he doesn't turn bad. You never know. Maybe Ezra's going to be a bad guy.
Right. But again, overall, even though we're only halfway through this season, and I wish it was longer, but I mean, I guess in a way, when you add up, like I mentioned earlier, these 2-part pilot movie, when you add up the tiny little pieces of the episode, you're getting close to the 20 episode mark, because 13 episodes to me is not a full season. We were used to Clone Wars having somewhere in the 20s for their normal seasons, not the ending seasons when everything was finishing. But I hope that when we get to season 2, this will be a full 20 plus episode season.
Well, a quote here online says that...
13 episodes is what I heard.
Well, a quote here I'm reading right in front of me that says, Simon Kinberg has stated that the first season will contain 16 episodes. And I don't know if that involves the things you're talking about, like with the movie and the
that's the thing.
The mini-sodes.
Yeah. Think about this. It's 13 episodes. The movie counts as 2, so now that makes it 15. And the mini episodes count as 1. That's 16.
There you go. So that's your answer.
There's your 16. But to me, 16, it still feels kind of light for a season.
Well, maybe they couldn't afford to go all out in case it failed.
Right.
This is the type of thing that wasn't allowed to fail. It wasn't allowed to fail.
Right. But a lot of shows do that. Even a show as huge as The Walking Dead, I remember the first season was a half a season. Once they realized they had a hit, full seasons for everybody.
Even Beware the Batman, which was a brand new Batman about a year and a half ago, was going to be the next big Batman cartoon. It kind of got canned after about 9 episodes, and they kind of just burned the other episodes late at night last summer. So
I think they're in good shape. I think these guys are in good shape.
I don't think we have anything to worry about in terms of Star Wars, is all I'm saying. Right. I think this is Star Wars, and if the same people who are doing this can make Episode 7 feel like Star Wars, my worries will be allayed.
Yeah, we're definitely in good shape. And as far as the show goes, I think we're both pretty eager fans of it, and we're keeping up with it. I know that we normally watch them, they come out once a week, but I know through Disney XD,
we almost like we're cheating,
app,
we're getting sneak previews, and I think that's what they like.
If you have the Disney XD app, or if you can do it on the internet, on the website, if you have the code for it,
or you can steal your friends,
you can watch every episode a week in advance. So that's something to keep in mind if you guys want to see these ahead. But obviously, sooner or later you're going to run out of episodes, so it doesn't matter. Now, we don't have time to talk about toys right now, because not only do we know for a fact there's a lot of toys coming, but there is a delay happening recently with the whole Rebels action figure line that is slowly starting to trickle back in again. So on a future episode, when we talk about more toy-related Star Wars materials, we're going to take a deep dive into the toy area, and I'm sure you'll be familiar with our comments.
I think we're going to have toys to talk about for many, many years.
No kidding, no kidding. But listen, I want to thank James, first of all, for joining me today on this subject that is one of our never-ending subjects, and I'd like to thank you guys for listening, and we will see you here next time at GeekFest Rants. Bye-bye, everybody.
Bye-bye.
This is Master Obi-Wan Kenobi. I regret to report that both our Jedi Order and the Republic have fallen, with the dark shadow of the Empire rising to take their place. This message is a warning and a reminder for any surviving Jedi. Trust in the Force. Do not return to the Temple. That time has passed, and our future is uncertain. We will each be challenged. Our trust, our faith, our friendships. But we must persevere, and in time, a new hope will emerge. May the Force be with you, always.
The Jedi Knights are all but destroyed, and yet your task is not complete, Inquisitor. The Emperor has foreseen a new threat rising against him. The children of the Force. They must not become Jedi.
Yes, Lord Vader.
Hunt down this new enemy, and if they will not serve the Empire, eliminate them along with any surviving Jedi who would train them. This is my master's command.
And so it will be done.
You said Misa gonna die?
I have to get my adult beverage to help make the show go smoother. Papa needs his medicine.
Shut up! Shut up!
I am not a 12-year-old girl.